My name is Natasha Smikles. I am the Director of Impact and Operations at Metabolic Collective, and I'm very excited to see you all here today. We have a really cool discussion panel from the Cholesterol Code documentary, which came out on Amazon. We were saying probably about 3 weeks ago now, and it has had a tremendous amount of reviews. So right before this call, I think it was Dave and Robyn were saying there's over 450 reviews, which I think is incredible. I was not expecting that. I thought they were going to say like 150. So awesome job with that. I know a lot of you in our community too have been very helpful in spreading the word in terms of downloading the video, watching it via rental, and then posting reviews. So thank you so much, everybody who's been doing that. You've really been helping our movement quite a bit. So in terms of our discussion panel today, we do have the amazing Dave Feldman, who all of you must know at this point. So in terms of introductions, we're going to go through each person. We have Dave, we have Matt Baszucki, we have Robyn Dobbins, and then we have Eric Rodgers in with us. So I'm going to be moderating the discussion panel. We'll go through, we'll do introductions. And then as I mentioned earlier, as you have questions, put them in the chat and I'll queue up Stephen to ask those questions on your behalf. So with that being said, we're going to start off with our introductions here. And Dave, I'm going to start with you. I know this is kind of the star of the film here. So if you could just give us a little bit of an introduction, but also fill us in with some kind of a little fun fact or something we don't know about you. Give us the behind the scenes look at who is Dave outside of the film.
So of course the film covers a bit of my story. In fact, honestly, it covers more of my story on the run-in with my past than many of the others who share the panel with me today. It is ironic because I've now had a podcast where I've shared almost everything about me to some extent. But I think one thing that does surprise people is the few times that I do mention it is that I also loved moving here to Las Vegas because at the time that I moved, I was kind of into playing poker. I enjoyed being able to play poker whenever I wanted to, particularly Texas Hold'em. And a fun fact that I haven't discussed before is that for the film, there was even a point where we did a little film montage of me laying out cards and discussing how pot odds are comparable to something regarding research. That may at some point get edited together and we may release it as its own little, vignette or something like that. But it was fun getting a chance to kind of connect that part of my prior world a little bit more with the film today.
Did you still play poker?
Not as much. Like the research really takes up pretty much all my time. But I occasionally think about maybe going back and playing a tournament or two. I just don't know that I'd have the same bandwidth as I used to.
Okay, very cool. Thanks, Dave. All right, I'll bounce over to Robyn next. So Robyn, if you can introduce yourself and just some kind of a little fun fact we don't know about you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robyn Dobbins, and my name didn't always rhyme. So there, fun fact. No, I work here with Metabolic Collective as a community coordinator. My passion that I've recently really tapped into is storytelling. So I also host a podcast called Keto Biography. So I would love for you guys to listen to that or watch it. It's on YouTube as well. Fun fact about me is that my degree is in environmental education. And when I graduated college, I served a year with what's called AmeriCorps. So it's a volunteer organization. And I did a lot of handling strange animals, not strange, but handling wild animals. So there are no pictures of me doing this, but I used to handle raptors and I would handle snakes. I've handled alligators. I've done all this work to share educational materials with young children about the wildlife and the environment.
Okay, I have to ask though, what did you mean by raptors?
I have handled several different species of owls. And a funny one is that at a zoo where I served as a docent, I would clean this cage for this great horned owl. So they're very large owls, but it was blind. So I would be, if you don't know anything about an owl, they have what's called silent flight. So this is a huge bird. It's like this big bird that doesn't make a sound when they fly. And I would go in there in its cage with a rake and a whole bunch of mice. And I'd be trying to rake and it would be trying to find the mice. It would be going like this and swooping around me. And I was enclosed in its enclosure. So that was kind of wild. And it never hurt me, but it was kind of a strange experience. But other big birds I've handled, like a turkey vulture, and then smaller owls, like a little screech owl. They're only like this big. Yeah, all kinds of different birds. And I kind of drew the line at the Madagascar hissing cockroaches. Even though they're completely harmless, they make sounds and they're cockroaches. So I would be fine with snakes and reptiles and birds, but not the bugs so much.
Okay, got it. No cockroaches. Oh, I'm gonna note that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Robyn. All right. Matt, how about for you? Quick intro and something we don't know about you.
Okay, hey everyone, I'm Matthew Baszucki. I have a small YouTube channel about metabolic health for serious mental illness. I recovered from my own bipolar disorder using keto and metabolic therapies. And I also work for a startup, tech startup. And fun fact about me, I'm a big classics nerd. I really like to read Latin, and I'm working on my Greek, just starting that. So for some reason, I chose languages that nobody can speak. So maybe that says something about who I am. I don't know. But yeah, I really like to read the classical authors.
Hey, very cool. I definitely would not have thought that. I do have a question for you too. It's kind of what Robyn was saying, kind of made me take note when she was talking about critters. I've seen some of your YouTube posts and I see a snake. Is that your snake?
Oh, I used to own a pet snake. Yeah, I had a Burmese python. It was about 8 inches when we got him, and then, or she, when we got her, and she was 6.5 feet after a year. And
Wow.
then I had to give her back to a professional snake keeper because she was too big. But yeah, we used to feed
Wow.
her little rodents and stuff. She was great.
Very cool. Okay, thanks, Matt. And Eric,
Yeah,
introduction and fun fact.
yeah. So I'm an optometrist. I've nearing retirement, but I still like seeing patients. And fun fact is, I played billiards in a pool league for probably more than 10 years. Get a little bit better at times, but our team has won twice and gone to the tournament in Vegas. We won our state
Oh,
and went to Vegas. So, and we're in a tournament again. If we make it one more, couple more matches, we would be in Vegas for the big pool tournament. So that's kind of fun.
wow. Fun. Okay, very neat. Okay. All right. So I have a bunch of questions that were generated from a lot of you guys. So I'm going to start going through that. And as I mentioned, just as a quick reminder again, please ask whatever questions you have in the chat because partway through, I'm going to get Stephen to go through those questions. So anything you have about the cholesterol code film, or if you have any questions even about some of those behind the scenes look, I think that that's totally fine to ask. Part of what we're doing with Metabolic Collective is we really want to get to know each other. We want to try to really engage in community. So I think for the most part, as long as the questions are appropriate, we'll ask them on your behalf. Okay, so Dave, one of the first questions that I have for you is during the film, was there a moment or a story that actually just genuinely surprised you and changed the way you perceived something?
Um, I will say that when I was first connecting with Robyn Dobbins, I was impressed with the sheer length and breadth of her metabolic journey. Of course, she could speak to it being on the panel here, but there's a lot of folks who go on a ketogenic diet, especially if they're coming from a place of metabolic challenge, it's, and I don't love that people get discouraged by this, but a lot of times they want to go from being, fairly overweight, challenged, to being a fit fluencer, where all of a sudden, they're in excellent physical shape, and they're going to the gym, and they're doing lifts and that kind of stuff. That's a lot of times something that is just not going to necessarily be as easy to accomplish for some than it is for others. And Robyn Dobbins has the full story, and spoiler alert, it's discussed in the movie. When she approached the diet, it was for the reason to come down in weight, but then move towards the fitness. So she has that kind of U curve that we also see with Dr. Tro, who also appears in the film. So I guess I could say I wasn't surprised with regard to how it connects with the energy model, but I was surprised that was the nature of her approach on it. So I don't mean to rob her story to give the answer, but it is the answer to your question with regard to something that actually surprised me. The other thing that comes to mind that was a bit surprising was I actually genuinely did not realize how old Dr. Bernstein was. And I will say that I was blown away by how cognizant he was for his age. I've met a number of 89-year-olds. Certainly, I never got to interview somebody as towering as Dr. Bernstein. But then I actually had the pleasure of being able to chat with him many times since then. I was helping him out with something related to social media, and I could not believe his level of energy and stamina at that age. So anyway, those are probably the two biggest surprises that came to mind.
Hey, Robyn, I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts on that.
I almost piped in and said, "You can't say me." That's my thought. But I knew what his answer was going to be because we spent a lot of time together over the past 2 months. So I assumed it was coming. My thoughts are, I didn't know what was happening while it was happening. So still a lot of this feels very surreal. So just to hear something like that is just like, that was just the natural course of my events. The fact that it fits so beautifully into the story is just a little bonus that I have gotten to enjoy.
Okay, thanks, Robyn. Okay, this next one here is for Matt. So, Matt, you've been doing such great work with promoting ketogenic diets. It's really helped you with your diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So, the question that we have here for you is when you started keto, I guess my question is how soon did you start seeing benefits from a ketogenic diet? And what did just the daily day-to-day look like for you as you were starting to recover?
So I started in 2021, saw the benefits after 8 or 10 weeks, I would say. And the reason is that there's this season, March, when a lot of people with bipolar disorder have symptoms because the days are getting longer rapidly. And I had to take high doses of antipsychotic medication in years prior. And in that March in 2021, I sailed through on a low dose of antipsychotic with consistent sleep, which had not happened to me any years prior. My sleep would just decrease night over night, 7 a.m., 6 a.m., 4 a.m. And then I would have to take extra medication. I was sleeping through the night. That was the first signal that something profound was happening with my metabolism. And those early days of doing keto were measuring out the food, eating 3 meals a day and tracking ketone levels with a blood ketone pricker and continuing to do physical exercise. My ketones were regularly above 3.5. They were even too high at one point. They were above 5. I took a little bit of honey or something. They came back down. So it was a process of dialing in the ketone levels, watching. I should mention one other thing. So yeah, watching ketone levels. But then I also believe I took a little bit of extra antipsychotic medication during the first couple of weeks because some people can experience mood symptoms when they first transition into ketogenic diet because the metabolic shift is so significant. Which is why I usually recommend people ease into it over a few weeks if they want to try this.
When you mean easing in, how would you recommend doing that? Are you saying kind of like a gradual drop, like maybe moving carbs down to like 100 or like 150, 150 and over a few weeks?
Yes, for people who have specifically bipolar disorder or schizoaffective disorder or any mood illness, even depression, potentially misdiagnosed, or with some, mood elevation that can happen, bipolar 2. A lot of the time when people enter ketosis, if they've been eating 50% of their caloric uh, calories from carbohydrates their entire life, their caloric profile, then that's a big metabolic shift to happen overnight. And some people can swing into an episode of mood elevation very quickly from just starting ketosis without adapting to the diet, which is why Dr. Georgia Ede recommends this. I also suggest people ease in over 8 to 10 weeks, drop the carbs from 50% of calories to 45 to 40, whatever, week over week for those 10 weeks until you're at 5% calories from carbohydrates. And people will generally be okay. And then also have your meds, your as needed meds on hand if anything happens.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point here too, especially if people are taking medications, the more you can kind of ease into that ketogenic diet, the more you can actually monitor how it's affecting the meds along the way here too. So, okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, Eric, so one of the questions for you, and this is also because you are a clinician, you do have a background in the medical field. What do you think clinicians are struggling with the most when discussing ketogenic and metabolic interventions?
Yeah, so again, I'm an optometrist, so I see a lot of
Yeah.
patients. A lot of patients, over my career now have diabetes. I don't know the percentage, but it's very high. And I'll ask them, what have you over the years? It's been 8 years of asking now. What did your provider tell you on how to eat? Just asking the type 2 diabetics, and it's not good. I mean, a lot of times they got no advice. I remember one 80-year-old man really vividly. He said, I was told to eat 6 small meals a day, and then everything in moderation. I said, well, what did they say for breakfast? He said, well, they said Cheerios and skim milk. And I just said, I didn't do anything. I just sat there. And I didn't laugh, but he looked at me, 80-year-old man. He said, that doesn't sound right. So yeah, they're just not educated and they don't have time. It takes too much time. I was talking to a physician a couple days ago, and it's a lot of it's time. They're paid in their visit by time, but it's more in adjusting medicines puts them up to a higher level. So a lot of barriers. That's where we're coming in from the patient angle. Patients see this movie, they go to their doctor and say, "Hey, why am I not trying this?"
Yeah, I think that brings up such a good point here too. My background is I'm a psychiatric nurse. I've worked in the mental health field for 20 years almost. And, time is a big factor. But I think too, when we're talking about this shift and we're talking about like ketogenic diets and metabolic interventions and how much it's helping just brain health in general, it's almost like a cognitive dissonance. It's almost like, I think when you're a clinician and you're trained a certain way, it's really hard for you to shift your mind into a completely different way of thinking. And that's why I think something like Metabolic Collective here too, why this is so incredibly important is a lot of this movement does have to happen from patients and people being able to learn, how do I advocate for my own healthcare? So I really appreciate all of you even coming on to do this panel discussion today. And I'm going to start opening up to questions in the feed because I feel like I've seen a few here and there. And I really want to make sure that the people who are coming online today do have that opportunity to ask the questions that they have, because this is just so important that we are able to band together as a community and to be able to also come out of this meeting feeling like we have some questions that are answered, and hopefully some of the discussion today too can help people feel sort of I'm looking for maybe a little bit more hopeful or confident that they can start having these conversations with some of their practitioners. So with that being said, Stephen, what do we have in the chat so far in terms of questions?
We have one question so far. It's for Matt and Robyn. How can friends and family convince or encourage depressed patients to try diet changes?
Yeah, I saw that question come through, and here's the answer, and you're not going to like it. You can't. You simply can't. You can be a shining example and live your life in that manner and hope that people see you. You can, if an opportunity presents itself, but don't force it, you can bring it up in conversation. But I mean, I have two children, and neither one of them eat a keto diet, and my son is off the rails. He's on his own. He's 21, so he's doing whatever he wants that usually involves beer and pizza. I do have concerns that he may follow in my footsteps, and there's not a thing I can do but watch and be there for him. He's seen me. He's seen what has happened in my life. He was the brunt of most of the pain and suffering that I had gone through. He took most of it because I didn't have anybody to put that on, and it ended up on him at a very young age. And now he sees me now. He sees the difference. So all I can say is we can suggest, but the best way that we can suggest someone change their diet is to just be an example and to just keep telling the stories. Again, that's where I go back to storytelling and why I'm so passionate about it. My story might not resonate with someone, but someone else's story might resonate. So if we get all of these different stories out there that people can listen to, someone's going to hear something and be like, oh, I get it now. I can try it. But most likely, me speaking to my son is not going to work, or you speaking to your loved one is not going to work. It just has to be more organic than that. I'll pass it to Matt.
I do have a suggestion. Sorry, just that what has worked for me a number of times is presenting it as a trial period, as saying, hey, would you be interested in trying it for like 30 days? I always open with 30 days because I feel like I could say, if you could do anything just for 30 days, why not do it just to get the information? You don't have to adopt the diet forever, but just think, if you got your blood work at the beginning, you got your blood work at the end, at least you'd find out if something can change from doing this. And it's not by any means 100% success rate, but I will say it's been over 50%. There's been a number of challenge cases I've been able to do within my own friends and family who have been responsive to that. So when it works, it's great.
I like that, but I also like something I heard Amber say, and so when you don't get any gold stars for being more restrictive than you have to be. That was such an interesting statement, because some of my friends are pretty darn healthy and they're doing just fine, and I would eat differently if I could, but I'm eating this way because I need to, and it makes me feel great. So I'll just throw that in.
Yeah, all great thoughts. I would add one thing. So I always, think the best thing for a relative of an alcoholic to do is to go to a program called Al-Anon, which will teach that person how to take ownership of their own powerlessness over their alcoholic loved one, set boundaries. I think there's something to be said for doing keto yourself. If you have a loved one who is struggling with a mental illness, you want to see them do keto. You want to see your loved one eliminate drugs, alcohol, all these substances, maybe you should stop doing that yourself. You want to see your loved one do keto, probably should be a project for both parents, arguably the whole family, to take on keto and just make this a topic of discussion. And then via osmosis, the loved one will take it on. So, I mean, of course, they're not going to do it if you're still eating carbs and if there's still garbage in the house.
Such a good point, and it makes me want to bring up that we do have a family friend support group with Metabolic Collective. I think we just discussed it's been running since October of last year, so we're over that 6-month mark. So if there's anybody who has logged in that wants to take Matt up on his suggestion, and they have a loved one but they want to feel a little bit more supported, you can just go to our website, metaboliccollective.org, and you'll see the information for the family friend support group on there. And it runs every 2 weeks, I believe. Yeah, every 2 weeks. Yeah. Okay. Stephen, do we have another question in there?
We have a question for
Thanks.
Matt and Dave. Somebody wants you to expand on your podcast, the importance of doing hard things in life.
Okay. Well, I mean, I really loved, and I just have to say it's one of my favorite podcasts I've recorded was when I had Matt Baszucki on. We really went crazy, but we were talking about the value of personal struggle, and that it's, you don't, if you think about the stories that you yourself remember or you like to watch in the movies or something like that, they're not the protagonist, inherited $1 million and then turned it to $100 million with little struggle or pain or personal sacrifice. No, the term, the hero's journey, it comes from these stories of overcoming both the external and the internal, because it tests you, and it's something that is part of the human experience. It's something we relate to. So odds are you'll know things that are already in your life that can challenge you in a way that can bring about growth. It's of course important to recognize the difference, because there are some things that are challenging that won't, but then a lot of success comes from failure. So it's, I think, important, and I bet Matt would agree with me, to just have it as a skill to constantly be in a state of looking for what challenges you next, and to be mindful of how that helps you grow as a person. Certainly, I'm writing a book about this whole research journey right now, and without question, it has been challenging in ways I can't even express enough. But at the same time, it's like a level of fulfillment that I could never easily put into words, even though I'm trying to right now. But then I see stories, and I said this in the panel last week, I see stories like Robyn's and Matt's, and I feel like I can't even relate to the level of depth and challenge and breadth that they've gone through. So I'm also appreciative of those people in my life who also help me keep it in perspective. That a lot of times our own personal challenges can seem like a lot, but look at how much I can be inspired by what others have accomplished themselves.
Yeah, what a nice thought. I think, humans evolved in a very difficult environment. You never knew when you were going to get food, cold, discomfort all the time. And that's the environment we evolved in. So our threshold for discomfort to facilitate mental health and robust mental health, that's the threshold, is difficult things for strong mentality. I will share one anecdote that has helped me. So there was this old guy in ancient Greece, Macedon. His name was Philip II. He was a king. He spent 23 years of his life in battle. He had his eye hit with an arrow. They had to scoop it out with a spoon with no anesthetic. His hand got completely mangled. He broke his collarbone. He had a spear shoved into his thigh, and then he broke his leg to the point where he was crippled. He could barely walk by the time he was in old age, and he kept going to war. And my point is that the threshold for discomfort in modernity is unbelievably artificially compromised, right? We don't even realize it because we're so immersed in just physical comfort all the time. But as a consequence of just this incessant physical comfort, abundance of food, abundance of resources, I've at least found for my own mind, I will magnify psychological problems in my mind that are actually not significant because my physical environment is so comfortable. So I still like to cold plunge in the mornings. I like to do uncomfortable things when I can. But just learning about what people have gone through in history, actually, it reframed my own struggle with mental illness. I've tapered psych meds. I've had excruciating withdrawal. It's made it more bearable for me because there are people who've gone through much harder. My situation in the grand scheme of human suffering is actually pretty good, not too bad, right? So that also helped me a lot.
This wasn't a question for me, but I want to chime in because I want to say that the struggle is probably has been the most healing part of my journey. You get to this point where you're living in this comfort bubble, like Matt's kind of describing here, is this comfort bubble, and everything is outside of the comfort zone. And so then you just become very closed off. And especially when you're just dealing with a mental health issue, it's easier to just kind of stay in that one spot than to put yourself out there. So I've had this fear forever of not using the phone. Like, I will not use the phone. And now I host a podcast, and I've been all over the country at screenings, and I've been on several panels. And all of this has happened in the very recent history for me. That's where the healing happened. The diet in and of itself was just a great baseline to get me to a place where I could feel the discomfort and learn from it. And then that's where the growth happened. That was really where the magic happened. It wasn't the diet. That's just foundational. The magic happened in putting myself in uncomfortable situations. So I know a lot of people may or may not have a mental health issue that they're dealing with, but they've gone into a keto diet and they have this energy who now practice jujitsu, because you're purposely putting yourself in some uncomfortable situations and figuring a way out of it. And there's just so much more than learning some self-defense that goes on with that. It's really just making your brain work in a different manner, and to be okay with some discomfort and to grow and build off of that. And if you don't give yourself those uncomfortable situations, you're going to stay stagnant. So if anybody has questions about whether or not to do that thing, whatever that thing is that makes you uncomfortable, I'm going to go with, as long as it's not illegal, go for it. It's beneficial to you in the long run to put yourself out there like that.
Yeah, and I want to throw in, once I recovered, your ability to do things is like, I mean, you have no ability when you're suffering, and even just, going through a checkout line is challenging. But once you've gotten to normal, then yeah, you want to take on challenges. You want to do more difficult things. And it's you surprise yourself that you can. Well, heck, I would never have gone on a movie. Good grief, that's not me. I would never talk in front of anybody. So anyway, I mean, I talked in front of patients, but. So to Matt's point, yeah, he's maybe further along than me, but you a lot of times you don't have to look for difficult situations. The difference is now I can handle them. It's like, bring it on. I'm ready, and I'm certainly not avoiding them. So.
Yeah, those are all such really good points. And I hear this all the time where people are saying like, oh, going on a ketogenic is really hard and it's difficult and it's challenging. And my mind always went to like, well, pick your level of hard, because I'm also sure that people who struggle with severe, debilitating mental illness, depression, right, bipolar disorder, psychosis, like that is also hard. So I do think having to do difficult things, going through challenges, that is just part of the human condition. It is something, that we do have to sometimes, if we're choosing to go through difficult, moments in our lives or struggles, that's ultimately what helps us grow too. So I really appreciate everybody's thoughts on that, because I do think that that's so important. And at the end of the day, we can't avoid struggles. It's just everybody's going to have some degree of pain and suffering in their life. So okay, I got another question here. So this one is for Dave. The question was, is there a sequel planned? Because of the catchphrase, the science is never settled. It kind of sounds like there might be a sequel. It makes me almost think of like the X-Files when they used to have that, that the truth is out there. So are we expecting maybe a sequel down the road?
Well, so for sure, there's a book that's getting worked on. There's a story that developed last year that kind of paused us from releasing the film until we let the story fully develop. Many who have been tuned into it have heard that we got an analysis, the second of 4, that was from a company called Clearly. And there's a lot to unpack there. but let's just say it was a bit disruptive and ultimately it got resolved. But the story behind it is a really fascinating one and really further like capitalizes on the phrase you just mentioned on the science is never settled. But it's also a very important one that I think needs to be told. And it ties into kind of this larger topic that Jen Eisenhart, the director of our film, and I are very interested in. And so we've said that we're going to go ahead and put a pin in it for now because both of us are just super crazy exhausted. We want a period of time where we're not actively in a gigantic project that takes multiple years of time, and just revisit it lightly to see where we're at in, like, say 2-3 months. So in short, will what I'm describing now be ultimately in a book, so where at least there's a sequel that's going to be embodied within that book? That I can say is, I'm very confident will be true. But will it actually find its way into another film or even a short piece that actually discusses it? That's a real possibility. We had a cut of the film through the end of fall and into the end of last year that included this story around clearly. The challenge was that it made the whole movie a lot more complex, a little bit more difficult for people to understand. And it basically became irrelevant once the retraction of the paper that relied on that data set became known, and literally no one was objecting to the retraction, which showed that effectively, even if they didn't want to state it out loud, even the people who were attached to that Clearly analysis, who were critics of ours, basically accepted that it was not a good data set. All of that said, the story behind it is really riveting. There's a lot of interesting twists and turns, and it really does need to get told. And it would be an interesting one to tell in film. It's just at the same time, I have such an appreciation for how much work goes into making this thing. The current film took us 4 years, and a lot. Whatever you imagine a film takes, even a small indie film takes, it is at least an order of magnitude, if not two, bigger than what you think it is.
Thank you for doing it. Everyone here thanks you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it sounds like you had an amazing response, right? You were even saying before the call here, like those reviews. Maybe talk a little bit more about that too, because it's kind of like it's surprising and it's amazing how well received this has been.
I mean, I don't want to sound like we're taking victory laps, but I'm sorry. The film
take them. They're deserved.
I said at the onset that my goal was to get us to 100 reviews. And 100 reviews for an indie film that doesn't have a multi-million-dollar budget behind it, where we said among ourselves, none of us were going to submit reviews, and we shouldn't anyway, because Amazon correctly could, pick this up. I was just crossing my fingers we'd get at least 100 reviews, and then, maybe we would also get into Amazon's Prime catalog if we were risen enough that there was some attention to them. And we're now up to like 450 ratings and reviews, which is mind-blowing, because you can look at other documentaries, especially other indie documentaries, and we're just absolutely blowing so many of those out of the water that, especially for as early as it is, Robyn reminded me it hasn't even been 30 days since we've been released, which is bananas. The other part is that we started at $3 per rental. Well, sure enough, Amazon did take notice, because they raised our price for the rental to $4.99. So instead of moving us to the main catalog, we're kind of the victims of our own success, that we're making enough money for Amazon and the aggregator that they're like, we're going to keep it as a rental for a while longer. It's kind of like if a movie is in the theaters, it stays in the theaters a while longer because the producers are, doing well enough. So I think it will still end up in the Amazon Prime catalog. I can't say I know for sure, but it's going to go wider release anyway come this summer. So for anybody who's in a country that can't access it yet, it'll eventually be available in what's known as AVOD, or advertiser video on demand, such as through YouTube or Google Play. and so forth. But yeah, there's no denying it. It's done quite well, and I just again want to thank everybody who also has been on this call. I've got to give a special shout out to Robyn, because Robyn's been such an MVP on helping to promote the film herself. But I also want to thank everyone on that vertical weekend, the weekend that we launched. I managed to get a whole bunch of, you guys can go there on my channel right now. I got a whole bunch of mega VIPs to just do this one giant live stream where they all kind of dropped in at different slots of time to help promote the film and share their own experience. And what can I say? Our story for the film is the story of low carb, which is that it's grassroots based, because it kind of has to be. Because as you see in the film, you can't count on the institutions, you can't count on the powers that be to back us. We kind of have a headwind, and the film has been doing great in spite of it.
I do want to take a second to say to all of you here through Metabolic Collective that I spoke with Jen, the producer of the film, yesterday, and she just extends a lot of gratitude to all of you. As Dave said, we were not allowed to, those of us who are in the film were not allowed to rate or review it. It would just not look good. So you cannot say that this 455 ratings had anything to do with those of us who are in the film. It was all you guys just supporting it. So, it was a lot to kind of promote it, but totally worth it, because you rose to the challenge, and you not only watched it, you took that second step and left that rating and review. So thank you all so much. And that's why we're doing this today. Basically, we're having the celebration for you guys, that you stepped up and came to the call when we needed you most.
Just so exciting that it's done so well. Like I said, it's exciting, it's surprising, and somewhat shocking too. So good job to all, and to the reviewers.
I think we neglected to say at the very beginning the reason why we are congregated as the panel. And just so everyone knows, there's this chapter, it's chapter 7, called Headstrong, and it is completely about mental health. So those of us who are here in the panel were all featured in that chapter, as well as Lauren Kennedy West, who could not make it tonight. But I just wanted to make sure we said that before we went too much further, because maybe we missed a little step in the intro there. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead with the question.
Yeah, no worries at all, because it is a mental health related question. So I'm glad that you stepped in. Yeah, so it was, what gives you the most hope right now about the future of metabolic mental health?
Oh, wow.
And I feel like we're in an upswing right now here. So
Where it's going to take over. I mean, number one, the efficacy of a ketogenic diet for serious mental illness. When you have something that works this well for so many people and can put symptoms into remission. I've heard this story over and over again of people who have had depression, suicidal depression for 20 years. They go on a ketogenic diet, but get the ketones up to 2.5 or 3 millimolar within a week. Within 2 weeks, they're saying, it's like the lights came on. I cannot believe how good I feel. I feel normal for the first time in my entire life. So the efficacy of the diet, the clinical trials, and the randomized control trial that's going to come out of Australia soon, and we're funding the research. And the grassroots movement has so much momentum right now. People are so enthusiastic about this problem, the ubiquity of the problem. Everyone knows someone who has a friend or a loved one who struggles with a mental illness, depression, schizophrenia, whatever it is. For those collection of factors, this is just going to explode. It's such an exciting time to be a part of this. It's truly a revolution in how we think about mental health.
Robyn, Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
What Matt said it all, right? Like, we are right on this cusp. I've said this several times. Like, at some point, you can't deny us. Like, we're here and we're talking and sharing this amazing experience we've had with our health and a rebirth essentially, and that momentum just keeps growing, and at some point it can't be ignored. We do happen to have within the US some support now. It's getting talked about, at least anyway, like some of these changes that are coming through with some guidelines and stuff, like that's exciting. The amount of research that's going on and being supported a lot by the Baszucki group and Metabolic Mind, and just all of this stuff that is out there to support. We don't have to just base this on N of ones and these stories anymore. We actually have science that can back a lot of this, and the questions that are being asked are starting to get answered. So I do feel like we're right on the verge of something where we will be able to have metabolic therapies as an option. But we've talked about this for so many things. It takes a long time to turn that ship around. A lot of people say you have to wait for the ones that are already practicing to no longer be practicing by whatever means that is, that they retire or whatever. And that's when the new thoughts and ideas can come into practice. I feel like we're moving faster than that. I feel like there's enough practitioners who now have experience with somebody who took their life in their own hands and started practicing ketogenic diets and other metabolic therapies. They're showing up in their practices and telling them, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I think they're starting to listen. We have so many people who were practicing in the old way who are like, my eyes were opened because I met this one patient who told me what they did. We're so close. I feel like it's happening faster than anyone could ever have predicted.
I want to add one thing, which is that there is a lot of discussion about the pejorative effects of psychiatric medication right now on the internet. Our RFK made some comments about this, about psychiatric medication withdrawal and side effects and protracted withdrawal, PSSD, post-SSRI sexual dysfunction, which is sometimes permanent genital numbness from coming off SSRIs. This discussion is going to create a vacuum for solutions as people learn about the dangers of psychiatric medication, because our entire existing paradigm of psych meds plus therapy is flawed. It is fundamentally flawed. These psych meds just mask symptoms. They don't treat the underlying metabolic dysfunction. They cause metabolic damage in the long term, many of them, to actually hurt people more than they help people in the long term. People are going to be so eager for new solutions, alternative solutions, that it's gonna open the doors for keto, for metabolic to just slip right in there. And I think we're going to grow rapidly as a result of that.
I'll say the quiet part out loud, though, just that there's no pharmaceutical equivalent level industry to promote the ketogenic diet, right? So again, it really is and has to be grassroots, because there is no giant financial model. So is there next to the next drug, the hotness that appears on our TVs here in the US, is there going to follow a commercial that espouses the benefits of reaching ketosis? No, it's just going to take the sweat equity. But as I like to say as many times as possible on the campaign trail for this film, it takes both, right? We need to get both the science done, and we need to put in that effort to extend these stories and to get the word out and to get it known as much as possible. Fortunately, social media, I find, has been very helpful in advancing that. But, there's just no getting around it. It is a headwind, and it will continue to be one. I do think, though, just to put a loop on that point, I think it's a very good time for us to have these discussions on, it's not just about the side effects of the drugs that are coming out. Matt and I discussed this in the podcast. It's the fact that there just aren't typically studies on the deprescribing of the drugs. And we can't be that surprised by it. What they would say in response is, well, wait a sec, that's a whole lot more money. That's a much longer human trial. But we at least see enough of it now such that needs to at least be mindful. It needs to be something that people consider before taking these steps forward. So
I'm just excited. It feels like we're hitting every lever that's out there, with Dave's film, with the Baszucki's research. And then I just think of little old me. I just walked through Barnes and Noble and saw in Psychology Today, and it was just a little article by Dr. E, and that was it for me. And so people are desperate. I mean, how many medicines did I try? We all know Matt and Robyn. I mean, and they weren't working. they were just not working. So there's a lot of people in our situation where we were who are desperate. So that you got those people, get this film to them, get stories out there. Metabolic Collective. It's exciting. I think there's a lot of momentum.
Yeah, I think that there's a ton of momentum, and this is an incredibly exciting time to be involved in this movement. I know I started a ketogenic diet about 2.5 years ago, and at that time there was hardly anything. The reason I didn't start a ketogenic diet sooner when I suspected it could help me was because there wasn't even the research there yet. And now it feels like every other week there's a research article coming out. So I'm always telling people it's not even a matter of if this is going to come and be mainstream, it's when. And how quickly can we help push this momentum forward? Because the quicker we can get this word out here, we can help so many more people. I mean, like half the people on this who are probably on the screen today have had some kind of either themselves or someone that's a loved one that's utilized a ketogenic therapy or some kind of mental or metabolic interventions that's been incredibly profound for them. So, I mean, we're all aware that these types of methods and interventions are going to be helpful. So it's on us too to help propel this and move this forward. Just like Dave did with the film. Like this just actually helps our movement. Even though the film wasn't all mental health specific, it had a key part in there. But, those types of things, or even what you're saying, Matt, with the movement that's happening in the US right now with the withdrawal effects from those medications, like the more we can piggyback on these other movements, the more it helps. It's like the ripple effect. We're just getting out there more and more, and it's going to hopefully change the lives for several, I would hope, like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So, Stephen, do we have any other questions in the chat?
We sure do.
Yeah.
This one's for everyone. Are there any updates on availability of the film in additional countries?
Well, so yes, there's the 5-6 countries I think that I mentioned from before. It's already been advertised by our major distributor, which I believe is Indie Rights. That, don't quote me on this yet, we have to look it up, but I think it's June 20th that it goes, it premieres. Check out Indie Rights on YouTube, and I think they've got a premiere date already listed. And then basically what happens is it's released as kind of like a video, just like a regular YouTube video, but it's ad, supported. And you can be there for the premiere and even jump into the chat and discuss it then. But at that point, it'll then be widespread, I believe over most countries. And then people will be able to see it then. And if I'm not mistaken, again, don't quote me, I'm not 100% sure. I think if you have one of the paid YouTube subscriptions, I think you can watch it ad-free at that point. And so that'll be one way to do it. And then I think also there's Google Play, which will have a comparable scenario.
All right, I got another question for Dave. Is there data that shows the normal rate of progression of plaque so as to compare to your cohort?
Well, I really wish there were. So people know I'm very vocal about this. I'm going to be vocal again, which is that we should have longitudinal studies on metabolically healthy people in general. Like that should just be happening right now. Now, I will say that there is a study called Miami Heart, which we already did a match analysis with in 2024, that doesn't have longitudinal data. It has what's known as cross-sectional data. What that means is that there was a bunch of scans, but it was at one point in time. So everybody was recruited for this patient pool, which I want to say the participants were maybe 2,400 in total. They were scanned once, and then there's been follow-up after their scan to find out when they would get events and so forth, and then report that in the research. We were able to take our baseline scans and compare those to the baseline scans of the Miami Heart cohort. And it was, by the way, no statistically significant difference. In fact, ours was even trending a little bit better than the Miami Heart for what was otherwise a total match, but for half of the LDL. That said, no, as far as I know, there is no study or one that's planned that's like Miami Heart, but that it would have what's known as longitudinal data, which is that there's a follow-up scan or even another scan after that. One last thing I will mention, though, we're looking to re-recruit a number of participants for a third set of scans. They'll either be for a 5-year or even 6-year data point. So that's in the works right now. We're seeing what's possible.
A good question I see in there is progression rates in unhealthy people that are insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, diabetic. That's something.
And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of longitudinal data on not healthy populations, but it's difficult to make those comparisons. And we want to be intellectually honest to say, we ourselves believe metabolic health is bad for your heart, and therefore it's difficult to compare with our metabolically healthy group. What I will say is kind of ironic, and Eric, you know, because you're on social media a lot and observe this in real time, is a lot of our critics have said, now wait a sec, you're putting your thumb on the scale by having metabolically healthy people with high LDL. And I'm constantly going, so are you saying if you have a patient that walks in with an LDL of 254, which is our average LDL, and they otherwise have low atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease risk factors, so they're otherwise healthy and they look good, you won't push them to take steps to lower their LDL? And of course, the answer to that question is no, they typically do. So that's the irony, is we again, Eric is uniquely qualified to know what I'm about to say to be true. We're held to radically different standards than the field at large. So you bringing it back to those who are less metabolically healthy, but for which there's longitudinal data, part of why we don't tout that comparison as much is because we already have that as our thesis. We believe metabolic health is relevant, not just when assessing cardiovascular disease risk with high LDL, but as the reason for the high LDL. If you have higher LDL because of insulin resistance syndrome, we think that's relevant when looking at it as it relates to cardiovascular disease.
Dave, do you think that science as we know it now is just lazy? It seems like nobody wants to do any of the deeper, we studied this for a week and now we know what the results are. We can move on.
And
I think it's a combination.
Afraid to be kicked out of the club.
Yeah.
They're in.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. That was one of them. Is the I literally wrote this into my book notes from this morning, as I call it acceptable double standards. There's a kind of acceptable double standards. And to be fair, this is with human populations throughout history, is if there's a let's call it in vogue double standard for which somebody with common sense can look around and be like, hey, wait a sec, you're holding this group to a different standard than to that group. What ends up making it more acceptable is if a whole lot of people are doing it at the same time. And then you feel this like herd comfort that there's a diffusion of responsibility for being consistent, logically consistent, right? And you think in 2026 that's harder to pull off because you've got the internet. But it is a factor, and Eric just mentioned that. It's a factor that we have to kind of combat. And it's difficult because ultimately, what is science if not seeking truth, right? But there is this other factor that I've really underestimated, but I've now talked about a lot on the podcast, which is that I think we're also wired as humans to want simple We want problems to turn out to be simple, and we want the solutions to those problems to also turn out to be simple. There's literally, it's not just a matter of understanding it that way. It's that we want it to be that way. So it feels good to know we've got a thing that we can solve really easily, and therefore we gravitate toward it being how our worldview is. And that's a much larger battle. And so I think that that's a factor with regard to why a lot of scientists have a difficult time breaking away from that paradigm, because it's just a very easy one to get stuck in.
I want to say this. For me, I had depression. It was there. Okay, well, there's a potential that high cholesterol might worsen heart. That's a potential. I fixed a problem that was directly in front of me, and you're going to tell me to worry about a possibility in the future when I just solved the biggest problem I ever had. So anyway, yeah, people get hung up on the cholesterol, and they kind of forget, well, wait a minute, I've solved my diabetes, or I've solved my mental illness, or whatever.
One of my favorite moments from the film was when the dad of the diabetic kid just looked at his kid and said, "He looks healthy." When amid this sea of experts and Claude and Chat GPT and internet and information, a lot of us lose touch with we have an internal compass that is been designed to help us, direct us in what we need to do. And like that was the most profound moment of the film for me personally. Because I said, because this man is trusting his intuition and not what all this establishment says. And it's confusing, getting lost in all of these people and different people are telling. So I just thought that was fascinating.
So I have another question for Dave. How does a movie that is following the research of a cholesterol idea, a lipid energy model, a new way of thinking, end up telling stories about mental health and diabetes and food addiction? How does it end up getting to that place?
How does it end up getting into a place of helping to move the paradigm?
Yeah. I mean,
So,
you were doing a science experiment on yourself, and
yeah,
now you've created a movement. So how did it get there? And did you expect that?
no. I think that there was, I've talked about this many times before, but I'll mention it here. I think there was a naive version of me in 2016, 2017 that kept thinking if I could just get these data that I'm collecting on myself in the hands of, and I kid you not, the two people I had in mind who I was getting my lipid education from stuff they put online was Peter Attia and Thomas Dayspring. And I kept in my mind then, I was like, if I could just reach these guys and get this data in front of them, I'd like to think that they're going to go, whoa, okay, because Peter Attia was very much into lipids and how it connects with keto, and so too was Thomas Dayspring. Both of them had versions in their own blogs on hyper responders. This is like a missing piece, and then they'll pass it on to the right people. There's like PhD teams and lipids that are like ready to go, and they're going to take it and run with it, and then I can kind of get on with the rest of my life. And no, more and more I came to recognize that I would just need to get more and more of the data codified and figured out, and then keep trying to ping everybody online, other lipidologists, other cardiologists. Eventually I would go to these conferences thinking that they all wanted to geek out with me and being wrong about that. So part of it was just genuinely not wanting it to get lost. Like, I did all this work, and then finally I put together the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype, and I didn't realize at that time how big of a deal it was. I would argue it's even a bigger deal than the lipid energy model itself. For as much work as we have in it, for as much thought as it is, the reason the lean mass hyperresponder phenotype is so important is because it forces together the high LDL with the high HDL low triglycerides. It forces a lens to look at people with likely good metabolic health alongside the high LDL. And I believe that that's why we've seen in the latter half of my research journey a bunch of people trying to erase it. and being like, this was made up. Nobody should use it. Stop talking. Like, it's literally like they're pulling a curtain over it, right? Trying to say, stop looking at that. People are paying too much attention to it. I think that that's a lot of what got the traction going, Robyn, that got a lot more interest going, because as I like that Jen used in the cut toward the end, curiosity is human, right? Our urge to get to the answers, that'll win the day eventually. We have to put up with all the stuff I just mentioned from before, like the urge to have simple answers, like the earth is the middle of the universe and the sun rotates. We like that. We can only like it for so long, though, before the facts just start to dawn on us and we can't ignore it any longer. People walking around like Jen Unwin, like Nick Norwitz, like Johnny Coughlin, walking around with levels that are comparable to homozygous FH, that's going to continue to glitch for a lot of people if they don't likewise look like people who have homozygous FH. That's where the stories become powerful. That's where we start to get the movement. And sorry, I know I've been a little bit on a soapbox, but I'll just say one more thing. It's also why I believe in the 10% rule. I don't think we need to change 51% of minds out there if we're right. I think if we're right, it's really about 10%, and that 10% is the hardest, and then it's like a slippery slope. That's how a lot of paradigms shift.
And it's not rare. FH is rare.
Yeah. Right.
1 in a million.
The Lean Mass Hyperresponder Facebook group has 14,000 members.
Thank you. Exactly.
And probably a quarter of them, if I'm being conservative, are bona fide lean mass hyperresponders. That's massive. It's gigantic.
I want to pull this back to a question that Matt put in the chat too. Matt, if you're okay to share that question, because I thought it was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as much as we believe that we have this momentum, this movement for this paradigm shift, we also know we're up against a lot of potential barriers. So Matt had an excellent point in here.
Okay. So my question is, how do we challenge the existing paradigms in medicine and financial incentives? There's a lot of stuff that goes on with the FDA and Big Pharma, where this is a revolving door in both directions. The FDA will send, or Big Pharma will send their people onto FDA advisory panels, essentially, to advise the FDA about medications. And then a pharma will hire congressional staffers and FDA officials. So it's all financial, is my point. What are the strategies? Because I know grassroots movement, Dave, of course, like this is what we need, but what are the tacticals? As individual people on the internet with our friends, family, how can we hit them and start to move the needle here?
I don't want to take up too much airtime in case other people want to chime in, but
I want to hear from you, Dave.
Okay. It is, I'm an engineer, right? And part of the book is, how do we solve this problem? It's a systemic problem, right? And the short answer is, I think AI is going to be a powerful adjunct to accomplishing this task. So if we can count on competing AIs to continue to exist in this space, if there's not one that ends up becoming kind of the monolithic one, and that one that becomes more of the monolithic one has a lot more susceptibility to influence by state actors, which is my biggest fear. Exactly the scenario I mentioned. If instead it continues to be competing AIs and there is competing level of interest, then there's a chance towards objectivity. The objectivity means that hopefully the consumer at the ground level can run prompts that can be vastly more superior in their analytic capability and reporting back of things that actually can be more thoughtful in how they result. Like, for example, I mentioned Clearly from earlier in this podcast or this panel. You could take the Clearly data set we have right now and throw it in, and I could give you the prompt that'll let you realize why it is that it's an implausible data set. But an average person couldn't have done that analysis themselves as an advanced statistician. So question number 2, How can we bring people to the awareness of a ketogenic diet being efficacious for many diseases that are currently thought by most medical professionals to be only treated pharmacologically or through surgery, right? The distance is shortening, because now I could be talking to someone else that's on this panel right now. I could be saying, no, actually, there are multiple ailments that a ketogenic diet has shown efficacy for. I know that if I give you a bunch of papers for you to read, you're going to be like, I'm just a layperson, I don't want to read it. But what I can give you is I can give you a prompt that's very human readable, that'll pull up what you need, and I can even tell you how you could tweak the prompt that's unique to your situation, that will be more compelling and convincing to you because it's tied into this larger system, this larger company that hosts that LLM, that we can trust to be a greater arbiter of truth, right? Because all of these are still going to be trained, they're still going to, be tweaked, and pharma, I think, is going, and a lot of these companies, they're going to be in a battle to try to keep the top-down directives pushed into them, such as guidelines, which is happening right now, right? But it's challenging to hold top-level directives, and many people who have played with these LLMs know this, that you can work your way through them because the top-level directives are dumb. LLMs are smarter than those top-level directives if you're wise enough to do it. So sorry if this got a little bit geeky, but the short version of this is I believe that we can, through these LLMs and possibly through AGI, which is a little more of an advanced topic, bring around the degree of objectivity that supports hopefully what we believe is correct, which is the truth. And the challenge to getting that out to them is just a matter of distance. And social media will help us hopefully close that distance to affect real change. We have to get to a point of greater transparency with data, period. We have it like crazy in the world of engineering and software development. We need to get to that point with data as well. And ironically, and I don't mean to turn this into a plug, that's one of the directives we have with Own Your Labs. And we just met with Keto Mojo from earlier. It's something we want to do with Keto Mojo and other partners in the space, is we want to make this data open and available. And then getting back to the LLMs, people can then even do analyses on the LLMs for ways that might be unique to their situation based on open data. So transparency, AI, I think we've got a shot. That's my long engineering answer.
I wouldn't have thought of that at all. So I actually appreciate that answer. My mind would not have gone there. Be curious to know, Robyn and Eric, if you have thoughts on that at all. How do we get through some of these barriers and continue to push the momentum forward?
Well, I listened to Averta Sammy Inkinen, and he went to employers and said, you use my service, it's going to end up costing you less money. And so that model's worked for him, and that needs to be, and I think maybe Dr. Tro's trying something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's Tro's model now too. He's working with corporations stuff to bring healthcare and take their insurance costs down.
But the bigger problem is individual doctors are, they code higher when they adjust medicines. And so this is a problem. I didn't know this part until recently, but there's ways to get to a higher level code. And the easiest way to get to the higher level code is to have a patient on medicine and discuss it and adjust it. So that's a tough one to fix. So.
Yeah, I wish we could come up with an answer for this today and then just go out and implement it. But there are just so many other forces at work here that are beyond our control. So again, I go back to my thing is like, we just have to keep talking about it. We have to keep sharing what these stories are. So, the more that we get those out there, I feel like the better that is. So some people are called to be able to go to their physician or just go into a medical facility and just start like a pharmaceutical rep, only they're talking about the ketogenic diet. There are people who are not at all bothered by going out and doing that. We need them. We need those people to go do that. There are people who will just be totally willing to go to a coffee shop and drop some information on a table for people to pick up. We need all of that. Like, there's a room for everything here. It can be as advanced as whatever Dave was talking about, something blah blah blah,
Well,
AI,
okay,
blah blah
I
blah,
want
blah.
to say,
And
I
then
want
it
to,
can be as simple
yeah,
as
yeah.
some people just being willing to share their experience and some information to go along with that.
I want Dave
Go
to
ahead.
figure out whatever he was talking about and combine it with metabolic mind and create that AI that I can chat metabolic mind, where I can just go, here are my situation, here's what I'm going through. What would be your first suggestion?
I may or may not actually be already working on a tool. So basically, the idea is, what if there was a central web interface that actually maintains a prompting schema? I realize that's fancy wording, but really it's fancy wording for saying, hey, how can we help end users who are approaching come up with prompts that are both human readable, but are actually themselves self-correcting towards an objective answer? Because part of the challenge, and unfortunately this is going to be true with all LLMs, is that they're affirming. They're trying to figure out what answer you're wanting to get, and then they'll deliver that answer, and that's why they can come up with very different answers. So the technological hurdle is to create prompts that, no matter who you are and what history the LLMs have on what your preferences are, it'll give you an answer that's comparable to somebody else with the opposite preferences. That's a bigger problem than it sounds like. But it's an important one when you're wanting to, I'm going to say the dreaded words, do your own research. The thing is, we've never had this level of capability to do our own research. It's just the challenge, the true challenge is to find the right shortened pathway to accomplish that. And that part's hard. I will say one other thing, which is just that, speaking about it from a political standpoint, it sure would be awesome if we could just set up systems that were aligned towards preventative care, since that actually will be an objective way to save money. The problem is that requires lobbyists to counter the existing lobbyists that have other incentives in mind. And I'm just too much of a realist to, hope for that one. There's not a lot of, I'll concede, I don't have a lot of hope on that front.
My wheels are spinning on how Metabolic Collective can provide prompts to the community so that they can just copy paste or add something that's specific to them and
You can
just
start
be
right now.
to use it.
You
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
and I'm not even kidding. Trust everybody watching this will necessarily need to learn prompt engineering. It's a fancy word for getting better at talking to these LLMs. You have no choice, right? So if you want to advance and help people, you want to learn more about the way to structure the prompts so that they're defensible, so that the results that come back, you can say, hey, this is the prompt that got this answer, and this answer is evidence-based. But part of the challenge to that is you put work into the prompt. It needs to be carefully, it can go through several drafts. It actually can take a lot of work, but I couldn't encourage you more to do exactly that.
My wheels are spinning trying to figure out when Dave must sleep.
I was going to say, Dave's
With your
doing that in his spare
101
time.
million projects,
Yeah.
you must be running a pretty good ketone level.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll tell you something funny, which is that I have to work on papers, and working on papers is like putting me in a room where there's just constant walls, chalkboard scratching. It's my least favorite thing of the things that I know I have to do. Whereas the moment there's some engineering involved, any kind of code, especially if I can vibe code and work with Python and so forth, it's like I'm let out of jail for, that my little, brief moment of exercise. Last night I was up until 2:30 because this new Feldman protocol pipeline is automating a whole bunch of the constructing of the episodes. And I'm just genuinely awestruck at how far we've all come in a preposterously short amount of time. Like AI is advancing so fast that we can make these entire platforms with vibe coding, right? But it it doesn't mean a lot if we can't get people to still understand how much their health connects with diet in the modern age. It is one thing I just have to fit in real quick is it is fascinating how much these paradigms shift when my own grandparents were way more aware of how much diet affects their lives, like then, without even getting diet advice from doctors or nutritionists or anything. Then a lot of my current cousins, I'm stunned by how much they believe that it's just luck of the draw and that it's genetics and that it's not really that related to what they're eating. Maybe just a little bit, but mostly it's outside their control. I think that's one of the deadliest things. And again, my hope is that AI will kind of help a little bit on the save there. We'll see.
Well, even if we're just changing our language and some small things that we can do on the individual basis is to not accept that it's just old age or just it's
Yes.
my
Mm-hmm.
genetic coding and all that stuff. Like, no, there's some work you can actually do to not go down that path. And we have created this culture where we just accept that's just normal. It's normal. It's normal for my 37-year-old dad to lose all of his toes and then pass away before he turns 40 because of his diabetes. Like that's totally normal. And it's absolutely not. And there is something that can be done. So if we kind of push back just on the language a little bit, that's even a simple change that could happen. I've stolen the floor, but Matt, I wanted to ask you if you're in a place to talk about this project that you've been working on, because I'm curious about it, your app.
Oh, well, okay. So we
If you're
built this
not,
app.
that's okay. I put you on the spot.
We built this app called Bro Strike. It's a meetup app for men to connect in real life over shared interests. So you could attend a pickup basketball event, a fishing event or movie night or something like that. But we've basically paused to do the marketing till I get through my carbamazepine withdrawal because I'm coming off my last two medications right now, an anticonvulsant and very, very low dose antipsychotic, tapering 1% a week. But my withdrawals are so severe right now that I just don't have the bandwidth to commit to doing this startup. Although the app is built, so whenever we want to do the marketing, probably a year from now, then we'll start and jump in. And the app is built, the market for in-person experiences is not going anywhere. I suspect it's just going to grow with Gen Alpha as they unplug, as well as men's experience and awareness of men's mental health and men's issues. So I have a big bet on those two zeitgeist vectors. It's like men's issues and also in-person events. And this app is the synthesis of those two. So I'm very bullish on the app. It's just I'm up until the late hours of the early morning frequently because I'm withdrawing on anticonvulsant medication that I've been on for 10 years that my metabolism and brain has adapted to taking every single day. And I have crazy symptoms like neurological symptoms with involuntary muscle clenching. I have crazy anxiety, panic, but I'm fine, guys, because my metabolic health is strong. I eat carnivore OMAD. My ketones are at 2.53 all the time. And I get outside and I go for walks and I'm taking time off work. So, and I don't have a wife and I don't have kids. It is the perfect time in my life at 29 years old to take 1 year to get off these meds. But to answer your question, Robyn, we will be hitting that super hard, but probably next year, January, February. I should be off all of them, hopefully by early next year at some point, fingers crossed. And the other, one final thing. What's crazy, you guys, about this whole journey of mine is that I do not have bipolar disorder symptoms. I have not had them in years. But the most difficult journey of my entire life, bar none, by far, has been getting off psychiatric medication. Harder than quitting drinking, harder than quitting smoking, harder than bipolar disorder, harder than psychosis. The last few years have just been because I was on 5 meds at high doses, and that, you know, this is just it breaks my heart that people have to go through this without metabolism, because without carnivore, without the metabolic stuff, I don't know how I would go on. It would just be impossible.
Props for sharing all of that, by the way, through your channel.
Yes.
So much. By the way, this is the first I've heard of your app. I couldn't be more in favor of your app. We should have another one of our chats at some point. Next time you're in Vegas, we got to do another chat, because I feel like I could talk for a while about my concerns on especially young men these days. We just have to do that thing where we're careful not to accidentally step into some, political camp on one side or the other. It's just it's a sociological consideration that I feel like should just be talked about from a scientific standpoint. But if you've got something that's going to improve camaraderie and platonic friendships, boy, do I think that's lacking right now with males these days, especially young males. And I think we're paying a big price for it. And again, I think this relates back to metabolic health too. I think there's a lot of self-soothing through food that you get around when you've just got better things to do. I really think so. So anyway, just my 2 cents.
We should do another episode. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but it's no question that being on these devices all day is making us atomized to a certain extent. And the goal of this app is to use the technology, use a smartphone to facilitate in-person experiences. I think this is particularly a difficult problem for men. You lose touch with your friends from college, or you get married, you're friends with all the wife's friends, and then you get divorced, and how do you meet other guys? We need other men. We need sex spaces, men's spaces and women's spaces. I'm sorry, that was universally acknowledged for centuries, but then we had a postmodern assault on that concept. So anyways, just my 2 cents. Dave, we should talk about it again. There's so much to get into there.
Yeah,
I actually want to
would
bridge.
definitely love to hear that. And thank you, Matt, for sharing what you're going through right now. And yes, been talking about it on your socials and on your channels as well. There's so many people. I know it's top of mind right now because it's become newsworthy, but just the fact that you're actually experiencing it and can tell it from that perspective, there's no replacement for that. So I appreciate that you've taken that step.
I want to bridge that into the final question, because we're getting up for time here. But the question that I want to ask is, because I think we're on this upswing with the movement, if we envisioned where we could be even 5 years from now, and if the upswing continues, what change do you want to see in 5 years from now? So I'm actually going to start with Matt. So that means you're off the medications, you launched your app. Where do you want to see the metabolic mental health movement in 5 years, and how will we know that we've made progress?
Yeah, so for me, of course, it's getting off meds. For the metabolic stuff, wow. We have multiple RCTs demonstrating serious efficacy for ketogenic diets for schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, schizoaffective, and anxiety. I think that's number one, because that is what's going to move the needle for many of the physicians. They need to see that. They'll refuse to believe that this can really do what people are claiming it can unless we have the RCTs. Because case studies, small clinical trials with no control groups, like the Ohio State, like Dr. Campbell's, are incredible, but a lot of clinicians want to see the RCT. And then maybe some NIH funding for ketogenic therapy, maybe a landslide of doctors using ketogenic therapies. A wave of metabolic psychiatrists, a wave of kids coming out of medical school practicing metabolic psychiatry. And honestly, guys, I suspect that's going to happen in 5 years. I believe the next 5 years are going to be even more transformative than these previous 5 years, because when you have a movement like this that spreads through anecdotes and word of mouth, it spreads exponentially. So there's an inflection point, Dave, like the power of AI, where this just begins to grow, out of control. It explodes essentially because of the network effect. So I do believe that's going to happen in the next 5 years.
Very great answer. Dave, how about for you? Where do you want to see everything in 5 years if this momentum continues?
Well, I'll give a qualifier. The qualifier is if my optimism proves true, and that LDL ApoB is of little relevance for people who have strong metabolic health. Again, qualifier, if that proves to be true. That what I hope I would see in my family, which I'm dealing with right now, which is that I feel as though it's, as I like to call it, just an unhelpful distraction. That's removed so that we can focus on things like metabolic health, like all of these psychiatric, metabolic psychiatry. I love the term so much, right? But right now, we already know this. It's a lot of the basis of the film. A lot of why those doctors who do learn about diet, when they first hear a patient's going on a keto diet, they report back the same stories, which is like, oh, they immediately said, this sounds like a diet high in saturated fat. You need to be off that. It's going to kill you, without even getting that much into the details, right? That's a big problem, because it's keeping a lot of people from taking just even the next steps of finding out if it's for them, if it can work, right? And so at least in helping to get to that answer of whether or not it's a significant problem to be concerned about, never mind whether it's a zero problem or a small problem, just that it's a significant enough problem. I hope that if my optimism proves true, then that's mostly out of the way so that we can just focus on what people can do to make their lives better, absent this unhelpful distraction, if that's what it turns out to be. I hope 5 years is more than enough time for us to get to that place.
Hey, great answer. Eric, how about for you? 5 years from now, what would you like to see?
More groups like Metabolic Collective where people can find peer-to-peer. I think, and then if that can expand then to maybe Matt's app, where you find people around you within 20 miles of you that are interested in learning about this, and then it's face to face, and I'd love to think there should be an app for that. I guess that's Matt's job.
So I'm gonna give a little slight spoiler here. We're currently working on getting a Mighty Networks community underway. So we have the app, and once people join that network, you will be able to see who is in your local area or your city.
Perfect.
So it will be a little bit of a database that way, that over time, as more people join that community, you'll
And
be able
more
to
conferences. I love going to
find.
conferences.
Yeah.
I love COSI. Maybe there'll be another one.
Add it back to the list there, Dave.
Yeah,
You'll never
yeah.
sleep
I think
again.
Sharon's on this call, so don't
Good
make
point.
Sharon
I
mad,
see.
okay?
She might
okay.
turn her
Like a
camera
little
on for that one.
cane that comes in and like yanks me out.
She's like, make them stop
Okay.
talking.
Robyn, 5 years from now, what do you hope to see?
Gosh, it's hard, but it's kind of the opposite. I'm always the opposite person, as you well know, Natasha, but I would like to see more unity. I know that there's a lot of different groups that are out there, and each of these groups are doing, small things, and they're doing very well with the small things that they're doing. I would like to see them get together somehow and find some common ground somehow. I just feel like there's still a lot of just like, you don't do keto right and you don't do carnivore right, like those kinds of things, and there's a disjointed nature to it. And if actually we could all agree that there's this range that's acceptable and that we can boost all of us together, it makes our voices louder, and then those communities will start to form on their own. And yes, I agree that we need to get out from behind our screens and to other places. Maybe not COSI, because Sharon will hurt us. But I love that there's opportunities to go out and meet people, and just taking those steps. I know the first time I went to a conference, I was scared and I didn't know what to do, and I hid in a corner. But to to be very honest, that's probably one of the best things I ever did, was to get out of my house and go actually meet people in person. So I would like to see our movement move away from chatting on the computers and move towards being in physical proximity with one another.
Fully agree 100%. So this has been actually really great overall. So I really appreciate everybody coming onto the panel today. Thank you so much for dedicating your time. If you are not yet a subscriber, go to our website, metaboliccollective.org. That's it. That's a wrap. I'm curious to know, Dave, any final thoughts, comments? Leave it up to you.
No, thank you all for supporting the film, of course. I did, by the way, I caught a couple times somebody mentioned, did I talk about my story regarding salt? Just real quick, there's literally a clip that's up on Real Dave Feldman on YouTube. That's from a Feldman protocol where I kind of unpack that. So hopefully you can find that and I talk about it at length. But bringing it back to the film, thank you guys all so much for watching it and supporting it. If you have watched it, I've got to give my little shout out. Every rating and review also is helpful for us. Only honest ones, of course. Wherever you stand at the end is what we'd be interested in. But it helps us to actually push forward the research. Shouldn't work that way, but it does, which is kind of a major theme of the whole film. Thank you once again for also having me on for the panel.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave, and thanks, Matt, Robyn, and Eric. Thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all. See y'all later.